The gunshot echoed through Nathan Everhart's mind for the 1,000th time that night, jolting him upright in his bed as sweat poured down his face, and his hands trembled against the rough wool blanket. Outside the window of his small ranch house 5 miles from Delta, Colorado, the September moon of 1884 cast long shadows across the high desert landscape, and Nathan pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to block out the images that haunted him every time he closed his eyes. 3 weeks had passed since the robbery at the bank in town. 3 weeks since he had been forced to draw his gun and end a man's life to protect the innocent people inside, and 3 weeks since sleep had become his enemy instead of his refuge. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood on shaking knees, walking to the wash basin in the corner of his bedroom. The water was cold against his face, but it did nothing to wash away the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like an ache that would not fade. Nathan was 26 years old, a cattleman who had inherited his father's ranch 2 years ago when illness had taken both his parents within months of each other. He had always been strong, capable, the kind of man who could work from sunup to sundown without complaint, but now he could barely lift a water bucket without his hands shaking. And his foreman had started giving him concerned looks that made Nathan feel like even more of a failure. The nightmares were always the same. He would see the masked man raising his gun toward old Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife who had been depositing her egg money. He would see his own hand reaching for the Colt at his hip, the motion so practiced and smooth that he did not even have to think about it. Then the explosion of gunpowder, the smell of smoke, and the way the robber had fallen backward with a look of surprise frozen on his face. Nathan had been called a hero by everyone in Delta. The sheriff had shaken his hand. The newspaper had written about his quick thinking and steady aim. But all Nathan could see when he closed his eyes was a life ended by his hand, and the weight of that knowledge was crushing him slowly. He gave up on sleep around 4 a.m, as he had every morning for the past 3 weeks, and dressed in the pre-dawn darkness. His clothes hung looser on his frame than they had a month ago. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had been leaving extra portions at dinner, but Nathan had no appetite. Everything tasted like ash in his mouth. He pulled on his boots and walked out into the cool morning air, heading toward the barn where his horses nickered in greeting. At least they did not look at him with pity or concern. They only wanted hay and water and a gentle hand on their necks, and Nathan could give them that much at least. By the time the sun rose over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have taken his breath away in better times, Nathan had already fed the horses, checked the water troughs, and started on the fence repairs that never seemed to end on a working ranch. His hands moved through the familiar motions, but his mind was far away, trapped in that moment in the bank, replaying every second and wondering if there had been another way, a better way, any way that did not end with blood on the polished wood floor. "Boss, you're going to fall over if you keep pushing yourself like this," his foreman Jim Rodriguez said as he approached with 2 other ranch hands. Jim was a weathered man in his 50s who had worked for Nathan's father and stayed on after the old man died. He was loyal and honest, and one of the few people Nathan truly trusted. "You look like death warmed over, if you do not mind me saying so." Nathan straightened up from the fence post he had been hammering and wiped the sweat from his forehead despite the morning chill. "I am fine, Jim. Just have a lot on my mind is all." "When is the last time you slept? And I mean really slept, not just laid in bed staring at the ceiling?" Jim crossed his arms over his chest and fixed Nathan with a look that reminded him of his father. "The men are worried about you. Hell, I am worried about you. What happened in town was not your fault. You saved lives that day." "I took a life that day," Nathan said quietly, his voice rough from exhaustion. "That is what I did, Jim. I killed a man. And now every time I close my eyes, I see his face. I hear the gunshot. I smell the smoke. It does not matter that everyone says I did the right thing. It does not change what I did." Jim was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. My brother came back from the war with nightmares that would not stop. He could not sleep for months after he got home. Mama tried everything she could think of, but nothing helped until we found someone who could sit with him and sing the old songs from when we were children. Something about having someone there, having that gentle sound, it finally let him rest. Maybe you need something like that. Someone to help you find peace with what happened. Nathan shook his head and turned back to the fence. I appreciate the thought, Jim, but I cannot imagine anyone wanting to spend their nights watching a grown man fight with demons. I will work through it on my own. Stubborn as your daddy was, Jim muttered, but he let the subject drop and headed off to assign the day's work to the other hands. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Nathan worked himself to the point of collapse, hoping that physical fatigue would be enough to let him sleep, but every night was the same. He would lie down and drift off for an hour, maybe two if he was lucky, before the nightmares dragged him back to consciousness with his heart pounding and his breath coming in gasps. He started avoiding town because he could not stand the way people looked at him, the mix of admiration and concern that made him want to climb on his horse and ride until Delta was nothing but a memory behind him. It was Mrs. Chen who finally intervened, and she did it in a way that gave Nathan no room to argue. She appeared at breakfast one morning in late September with her arms crossed and a determined expression on her round face. Mrs. Chen was a widow in her 60s who had come to Colorado with her husband during the railroad boom and stayed after he died in a construction accident. She had been keeping house for the Everhart family for 10 years, and Nathan thought of her as something between a housekeeper and an aunt. You will eat every bite of this breakfast, and then you will get cleaned up and come to town with me, she announced, setting down a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and biscuits that Nathan's stomach immediately rebelled against. No arguments, Nathan. I have found someone who can help you, and you will meet her today. Mrs. Chen, I do not need help. I just need time, Nathan protested weakly. But she fixed him with a look that could have melted steel. Time? You have had 3 weeks and you look worse every day. You cannot run a ranch if you cannot stay on your feet, and you cannot stay on your feet if you do not sleep. Now eat your breakfast and get ready. We leave in an hour. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving no room for discussion. Nathan ate what he could of the breakfast, which was not much, and then washed up and changed into clean clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes were sunken and shadowed, his cheeks hollow, his skin pale despite spending every day in the sun. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 weeks, and the sight made something twist painfully in his chest. The ride to Delta took an hour, and Nathan spent most of it trying to figure out what Mrs. Chen had planned. She was tight-lipped about the details, only saying that she had a friend who might be able to help him find some rest. Nathan wanted to protest more, but he was too tired to argue, and some small part of him was desperate enough to try anything at this point. Delta was a small town that had grown up around ranching and farming, nestled in a valley where the Uncompahgre River provided water for crops and cattle. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, some painted and some bare, with wooden sidewalks that kept pedestrians out of the dust or mud depending on the weather. There was a general store, a bank that Nathan had not been able to bring himself to enter since the shooting, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, and a handful of other businesses that served the surrounding ranches and farms. Mrs. Chen directed him to a small house on the edge of town, a tidy place with a well-kept garden and lace curtains in the windows. She knocked on the door, and after a moment it opened to reveal a woman who made Nathan forget how to breathe for just a moment. She was probably close to his age, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun and eyes the color of the sky just before sunset, a blue so deep it was almost purple in certain lights. She was wearing a simple calico dress in shades of blue and white, and there was something about her face that radiated both kindness and strength. She was not beautiful in the flashy way of the saloon girls or the painted ladies who sometimes passed through town. She was beautiful in a way that made Nathan think of sunrise over the mountains, of cold water from a spring, of things that were real and good and true. Mrs. Chen, it is so good to see you, the woman said with a warm smile, and her voice was like honey, smooth and sweet and comforting. "And you must be Mr. Everhart. Please, come in." They stepped into a small but comfortable parlor that smelled of lavender and beeswax. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was spotlessly clean. Nathan removed his hat and held it awkwardly in his hands, suddenly aware of how rough he must look, how exhausted and broken. "Nathan, this is Willa Kensington. She arrived in Delta about 6 months ago from back east. She gives music lessons to the children in town and has the voice of an angel." Mrs. Chen settled into a chair and gestured for Nathan to sit as well. "Willa, this is Nathan Everhart. He owns the largest cattle ranch in the area, and he is a good man who needs help that I cannot give him." Willa sat down across from Nathan, her hands folded in her lap, and studied him with eyes that seemed to see right through to his soul. "Mrs. Chen told me about what happened at the bank. That must have been terrifying for you." Nathan was startled by her directness. Most people danced around the subject or offered empty platitudes about heroism and duty. "It was necessary," he said carefully. "The man was going to shoot Mrs. Patterson. I did what I had to do." "That does not make it any easier to live with, does it?" Willa's voice was gentle, without judgment or pity, just understanding. "Taking a life, even when it is necessary, even when you save others by doing it, that leaves a mark on your soul. It is not something you can just shake off and move past as if it never happened." Nathan felt something tight in his chest loosen just a fraction. "No," he admitted quietly, "it is not. I have not been able to sleep more than an hour or two at a time since it happened. Every time I close my eyes, I am back in that bank, and I see it happening all over again. I hear the gunshot. I see him fall, and I wake up shaking and sick, and I cannot make it stop." Willa leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. "Mrs. Chen thought I might be able to help you. I cannot take away what happened or make the memories disappear. But I can offer you something that helped my own father when he came back from the war with similar struggles. He could not sleep because of the things he had seen and done, and my mother would sit beside his bed and sing to him. Old hymns, lullabies, songs from his childhood. Something about having someone there, someone to ground him in the present moment with a gentle voice. It helped him find peace enough to rest. Eventually the nightmares faded, and he was able to sleep on his own again." Nathan stared at her, not quite believing what he was hearing. "You are offering to sit beside my bed and sing to me? A stranger?" "You are not a stranger to Mrs. Chen, and her word is good enough for me," Willa said simply. "And yes, I am offering exactly that. I know it sounds unusual, but sometimes the unusual solutions are the ones that work. You look like you are at the end of your rope, Mr. Everhart. You need to sleep, and if I can help you do that, then I want to try. I could not ask you to do that. It would not be proper for you to be in my home at night alone with me. People would talk." Nathan felt obligated to point out the obvious problem, even as part of him wanted to accept her offer with a desperation that scared him. "I will be there as well," Mrs. Chen interjected. "I will act as chaperone, and anyone who wants to gossip can come talk to me about it. Your ranch is far enough from town that no one needs to know the details of how we are helping you. And even if they did, you have enough respect in this community that people will understand you are receiving medical care of a sort." Willa nodded in agreement. "I do not care about gossip, Mr. Everhart. I care about helping someone who is suffering. If you are willing to let me try, I will come to your ranch tonight, and we will see if this helps you find some rest." Nathan looked between the two women, seeing the determination on their faces, and felt the last of his resistance crumble. He was so tired, so desperately tired, and the thought of even one full night of sleep was enough to make him willing to try something that would have seemed absurd to him a month ago. "All right," he said quietly. "All right, I will try it. Thank you, Miss Kensington. I do not know what else to say except thank you." "You do not need to say anything else," Willa said with a soft smile. "Just be willing to let me help. That is all I ask." They arranged the details before Nathan and Mrs. Chen left. Willa would come out to the ranch that evening after dinner, and she would stay through the night, sitting beside Nathan's bed and singing to him when the nightmares came. Mrs. Chen would stay in the guest room to preserve propriety, and they would continue this arrangement for as long as it took for Nathan to find his way back to normal sleep. The ride back to the ranch felt surreal to Nathan. He could not quite believe that he had agreed to let a woman he had just met sit beside his bed and sing to him like he was a child, afraid of the dark. But there had been something about Willa Kensington, something in her eyes and her voice, that made him want to trust her. She had not looked at him with pity or made him feel weak for struggling. She had simply offered help, practical and kind, and Nathan found himself clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this would work. He spent the rest of the day trying to focus on ranch work, but his mind kept drifting back to Willa. He wondered what her story was, what had brought her from back east to a small town in Colorado. He wondered what her singing voice sounded like, whether it would truly be enough to quiet the demons in his head. He wondered if he was making a fool of himself by hoping that anything could help at this point. Dinner was an uncomfortable affair. Mrs. Chen had made his favorite meal, a beef stew with vegetables from her garden and fresh bread, but Nathan could barely taste it. His stomach was twisted in knots, part anxiety and part anticipation. He kept looking at the clock on the mantel, watching the hands move toward the time when Willa would arrive. She came just as the sun was setting, arriving in a small wagon driven by the minister's wife, who gave Nathan a kind smile and a firm handshake before leaving Willa with her small bag of belongings. Willa was wearing a different dress now, a simple gray one with white trim, and she had a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Thank you for letting me come," she said as Nathan helped her down from the wagon. "I know this is strange, but I truly believe it can help." "I hope you are right," Nathan said, and he was surprised by how much he meant it. "Come inside. Mrs. Chen has the guest room ready for you, and we can talk for a bit before we try this." They settled in the parlor with cups of tea that Mrs. Chen provided before discreetly retiring to her own room. Nathan sat in his father's old armchair while Willa took the sofa, and for a few minutes they simply sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the night sounds of the ranch drifted through the open window, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees that lined the creek. "Tell me about your father," Nathan said finally. "Mrs. Chen mentioned he was in the war?" Willa nodded, cradling her teacup in both hands. "He served with the Union Army for 3 years. He saw terrible things, did terrible things, and when he came home, he was not the same man who had left. He would wake up screaming in the night, reliving battles, seeing the faces of men he had killed or friends he had lost. My mother was beside herself with worry. The doctors said there was nothing they could do, that time would heal him, but time was not healing anything. He was getting worse, not better." "What changed?" Nathan asked, leaning forward. "My mother remembered how she used to sing to him when they were courting, before the war. She had a beautiful voice, and he always said it was one of the things that made him fall in love with her. So one night, when he woke from a nightmare, she did not try to comfort him with words. She just started singing. Old songs they both knew, hymns from church, lullabies she had sung to me and my siblings when we were babies. And something about her voice, about having her there in the darkness with him, it helped him find his way back to the present moment. It reminded him that he was home, that he was safe, that the war was over." Nathan felt a lump in his throat. "Did it work right away?" "No," Willa admitted. "It took weeks, maybe even months, but gradually the nightmares became less frequent, less intense. He started sleeping through the night more often, and eventually he was able to sleep without my mother sitting beside him, though she never stopped singing to him. Even now, years later, he says her voice is the thing that keeps him grounded when the memories try to drag him back." "That is beautiful," Nathan said softly, "and your mother must be a remarkable woman." "She is," Willa said with a smile, "and she taught me everything she knows about singing and about the healing power of music. When I heard what you were going through, I thought maybe I could offer you the same kind of help she gave my father." "Why did you come to Colorado?" Nathan asked, curious about this woman who had appeared in his life so suddenly and offered him such an intimate kindness. If you do not mind me asking. Willa was quiet for a moment, looking down at her teacup. I was engaged to be married back in Boston. His name was Thomas, and I thought I loved him. But as the wedding got closer, I realized that he did not want a wife. He wanted an ornament, someone to look pretty on his arm and keep his house, and never have an opinion that did not match his own. When I tried to talk to him about it, he told me that I was being foolish, that women did not need to have opinions, that my job was to agree with whatever he said and be grateful that he was willing to marry me at all. Nathan felt a flash of anger toward a man he had never met. What did you do? I broke off the engagement 2 weeks before the wedding, Willa said, and there was steel in her voice despite its softness. My parents were horrified. They said I was throwing away my future, that no other man would want me after I had jilted Thomas, but I could not marry him. I could not spend the rest of my life being silenced and diminished by someone who was supposed to love me. So I told them that if that was what marriage meant, I would rather be alone. That took courage, Nathan said, and he meant it. He could not imagine the strength it must have taken for her to walk away from everything she knew. It took desperation more than courage, Willa said with a small, sad smile. I could not breathe back there anymore. Everything felt too tight, too controlled, too full of rules about what I could and could not do. So when I saw an advertisement for a music teacher position in Delta, Colorado, I applied without telling anyone. When I got the position, I packed my things and left. My parents have not spoken to me since, but I do not regret it. Out here, I can be myself. I can teach children and sing in the church choir and live my life on my own terms. It is lonely sometimes, but it is mine. Nathan felt a kinship with her that surprised him. They were both struggling with their own demons, both trying to find their way forward after experiences that had changed them fundamentally. I am glad you came to Delta, he said quietly, and not just because you were trying to help me. I think the town is better for having you here. Willa blushed slightly and smiled. Thank you, Nathan. That means more than you know. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Nathan found himself telling Willa about the ranch, about his parents and how much he missed them, about the weight of trying to live up to his father's legacy while forging his own path. Willa told him about her music, about the joy she found in teaching children to sing, about her dreams of maybe starting a proper music school someday if she could save enough money. Finally, as the clock struck 10, Nathan felt his exhaustion catching up with him. He had been awake for nearly 20 hours and his body was crying out for rest even as his mind dreaded the nightmares that would come. Willa seemed to sense his struggle, and she stood up with a gentle smile. Why do you not get ready for bed? I will wait here, and when you are ready, I will come sit with you. Nathan nodded and headed to his bedroom. He changed into his nightshirt and climbed into bed, his heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and something he could not quite name. This was possibly the strangest thing he had ever done, but he was willing to try anything at this point. He called out softly, and a moment later Willa appeared in the doorway. She had removed her shawl and shoes, and she carried a straight-back chair that she placed beside his bed. She sat down and arranged her skirts, then folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with those remarkable eyes. Try to relax, she said gently. Close your eyes and focus on my voice. Do not fight the sleep when it comes. If you have a nightmare, I will be right here, and I will help you find your way back. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling incredibly vulnerable and exposed. For a long moment there was only silence, and then Willa began to sing. Her voice was everything Mrs. Chen had promised and more. It was pure and clear and sweet, like water from a mountain spring, like the first bird song of morning. Like every beautiful sound Nathan had ever heard distilled into one perfect instrument. She sang a hymn he remembered from church. Something about grace and peace and being held in loving arms, and the sound of it seemed to wrap around him like a warm blanket. He felt his body begin to relax despite his resistance. The tension that had been coiled in his muscles for weeks started to unwind. His breathing slowed and deepened. The darkness behind his eyelids was no longer threatening, but almost peaceful, filled with the sound of Willa's voice instead of gunshots and screams. He drifted off without even realizing it, slipping into sleep so gently that he did not have time to be afraid. And when the nightmare came, as he knew it would, jerking him awake with a gasp and tears streaming down his face, Willa was there. She did not touch him or try to speak over his panic. She simply started singing again, a different song this time, a lullaby about stars and moonlight and being safe at home. Nathan focused on her voice like a drowning man focuses on a rope thrown from shore. He let it pull him back from the edge of the nightmare, back to the present moment, back to his bedroom where he was safe and the danger was long past. His breathing gradually slowed, and when Willa transitioned into another hymn, he found himself drifting off again. The pattern repeated itself 3 more times that night. Each time Nathan woke from a nightmare, gasping and shaking, Willa would be there with her voice, gentle and steady and unwavering. And each time he found it a little easier to come back to himself, a little less terrifying to close his eyes and try again. When dawnlight finally filtered through the window, Nathan woke to find himself more rested than he had been in 3 weeks. He had not slept through the entire night, but he had slept in stretches of an hour or 2, and that was more than he had managed on his own. He turned his head and saw Willa still sitting beside his bed, her eyes closed and her head tilted back against the chair as she dozed lightly. She must have been awake most of the night singing to him, sacrificing her own rest to give him some measure of peace. The realization made Nathan's chest tighten with an emotion he could not quite name. Gratitude, certainly, but something more than that. Something warm and fierce and protective. "Willa?" he said softly, and her eyes opened immediately. She straightened up and looked at him with concern. "Did you have another nightmare? I must have dozed off. I am so sorry." She looked genuinely distressed at the thought that she might have failed him somehow. No nightmare," Nathan assured her quickly. "I woke up on my own naturally because the sun is rising. Willa, I cannot believe it, but I actually slept. Not all night, but more than I have in weeks. You did that. Your voice did that." The smile that spread across Willa's face was like the sunrise itself, bright and warm and full of hope. "I am so glad. I know it is not a cure, Nathan. You will still have difficult nights, but this is a start. This is proof that you can find rest again." "How can I ever thank you?" Nathan asked, sitting up in bed. "You gave up your own sleep to help me, a man you barely know. That is an incredible kindness." "You do not need to thank me," Willa said, standing up and stretching slightly, her back probably stiff from sitting in the chair all night. "Helping you is its own reward. Now I should go clean up and then head back to town. I have lessons this afternoon." "At least stay for breakfast," Nathan said. "Please, let Mrs. Chen feed you properly before you go." Willa agreed, and they made their way to the kitchen where Mrs. Chen was already preparing a substantial breakfast. The older woman took a one look at Nathan's face and beamed with satisfaction. "You slept," she said with certainty. "I can see it in your eyes. They are not as shadowed as they were yesterday." "I did sleep, thanks to Miss Kensington," Nathan said, pulling out a chair for Willa before taking his own seat. "She has a remarkable gift." Over breakfast, they discussed the arrangement going forward. Willa offered to come to the ranch every evening for as long as Nathan needed her help. Mrs. Chen would continue to act as chaperone, staying in the guest room to preserve propriety. Nathan tried to insist on paying Willa for her time and effort, but she refused. "This is not a business transaction," she said firmly. "This is one person helping another person who is struggling. You do not owe me money for that." "Then let me at least make sure you have safe transportation back and forth," Nathan said. "I will send Jim with a wagon every evening to collect you and bring you home every morning. It is not right for you to make that journey alone." Willa considered this and nodded. "That would be acceptable. Thank you." The pattern established itself over the following days and weeks. Every evening just after dinner, Jim would drive the wagon to town and return with Willa. She would spend an hour or two talking with Nathan in the parlor, the two of them getting to know each other in a way that felt both natural and profound. Then when Nathan could no longer keep his eyes open, he would retire to his bedroom and Willa would take her place in the chair beside his bed. She sang to him every night, her repertoire seemingly endless. Hymns and lullabies, old folk songs and ballads, songs in languages Nathan did not understand but found beautiful anyway. Sometimes she would sing for hours, her voice unwavering even when Nathan woke from nightmares multiple times in a night. Other times, Nathan would sleep for longer stretches, and Willa would doze in her chair until he needed her again. Slowly, gradually, Nathan began to heal. The nightmares did not stop completely, but they became less frequent and less intense. He started sleeping for 3 hours at a time, then 4, then occasionally 5. His appetite returned, and the weight he had lost began to come back. The shadows under his eyes faded, and his hands stopped shaking when he worked. The ranch hands noticed the change and seemed relieved to have their boss back to something resembling normal. But the healing was not just physical. Something was growing between Nathan and Willa, something neither of them had anticipated when this arrangement began. The evening conversations in the parlor stretched longer and longer, covering everything from philosophy to favorite childhood memories to dreams for the future. Nathan found himself thinking about Willa during the day when she was not there, wondering what she was doing, looking forward to the evening when he would see her again. And Willa seemed to feel the same way. She started arriving earlier in the evenings, accepting Nathan's invitations to have dinner with him and Mrs. Chen. She would laugh at his stories about life on a ranch, and her eyes would light up when she told him about a student who had finally mastered a difficult piece of music. They would sometimes walk together in the evening, strolling through the ranch grounds as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. 6 weeks after that first night, Nathan woke from a full night of sleep without a single nightmare. He opened his eyes to find morning sun streaming through his window and Willa asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head tilted at an angle that would surely give her a crick in her neck. He felt an overwhelming rush of tenderness looking at her, at this remarkable woman who had given him so much without asking for anything in return. "Willa," he said softly, and she stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "I slept through the entire night. You did not have to sing to me even once." Willa sat up, wincing slightly as her neck protested, and then her face broke into a radiant smile. "Nathan, that is wonderful. That's exactly what we have been working toward." "I know," Nathan said, and then he felt a strange twisting in his chest because he realized what this meant. "I suppose you will not need to come every night anymore. If I can sleep through the night on my own, there is no reason for you to keep sacrificing your rest for me." Something flickered in Willa's eyes, an emotion Nathan could not quite read. "I suppose you are right," she said slowly. "We should see if you can maintain this on your own. Perhaps I should stay away for a few nights and see how you manage." Nathan wanted to protest, wanted to tell her that he did not want her to stay away, that he had come to need her presence for reasons that had nothing to do with nightmares and everything to do with the way his heart seemed to beat differently when she was near. But he could not find the words, could not figure out how to tell her what he was feeling without risking the friendship they had built. "Perhaps you're right," he said instead, hating himself for the cowardice even as the words left his mouth. "But thank you, Willa, for everything you have done for me. I do not know how I would have survived without you." "You are stronger than you think, Nathan," Willa said, standing up and smoothing her skirts. "You would have found a way through this eventually. I just helped speed the process along." She left that morning as usual, Jim driving her back to town in the wagon. But there was something different about her departure, something that felt more final than all the other mornings she had left. Nathan watched the wagon disappear down the road and felt an ache in his chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion or nightmares. He spent the day trying to convince himself that this was for the best. Willa had her own life, her own commitments. She had already given him so much of her time and energy. He could not expect her to keep coming to the ranch indefinitely, especially now that he was sleeping better. It would be selfish to ask her to keep up the arrangement when he no longer strictly needed her help. But that night, lying in his bed alone for the first time in 6 weeks, Nathan realized the truth he had been trying to avoid. He did still need Willa, desperately, but not because of the nightmares. He needed her because somewhere along the way, in all those late-night conversations and in the gentle comfort of her voice singing him to sleep, he had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with her. The realization kept him awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do with this knowledge. Willa was extraordinary, everything he had ever wanted in a partner without even knowing he wanted it. She was kind and strong and talented and brave. She had crossed the country to build a new life on her own terms. She had sat beside him night after night, offering comfort and healing without judgment or expectation. She made him laugh and made him think and made him want to be a better man than he had been before. But what could he possibly offer her in return? He was a rancher, tied to this land and this life. He could give her security and a home, but could he give her the freedom she had fought so hard to claim? Would she even want a life with him? Or had she simply been performing an act of charity for someone in need? Nathan eventually fell asleep sometime after midnight, and to his relief, he made it through the night without a nightmare. But when he woke in the morning, the first thing he felt was disappointment that Willa was not there in the chair beside his bed, and he knew that he could not go on like this. The second night was harder. Nathan slept fitfully, waking every few hours and reaching for the sound of Willa's voice before remembering that she was not there. He did have a nightmare around 3 a.m, not as bad as the ones that had plagued him in the beginning, but disturbing enough to leave him shaking and gasping. He wanted to call out for Willa before he remembered that she was miles away in town, probably sleeping peacefully in her own bed, and he had no right to disturb her. The third night, Nathan gave up. Pretending that he could do this on his own, he dressed before dawn and saddled his fastest horse, riding into Delta as the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with light. He rode straight to Willa's small house and knocked on the door before he could lose his nerve. It took several minutes before the door opened, and Willa appeared looking sleepy and confused. She was wearing a nightgown with a robe thrown over it, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way that made Nathan's breath catch. "Nathan, what is wrong? Are you all right?" She looked genuinely worried, and Nathan felt a rush of affection for her concern. "I am fine. I am not fine, but not in the way you are thinking." He took off his hat and twisted it in his hands, suddenly feeling like a nervous boy instead of a grown man. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something important." Willa stepped back and let him into her small parlor, closing the door behind them. She lit a lamp against the early morning dimness and turned to face him with questioning eyes. "What is this about, Nathan? You look like you have been riding hard. Did something happen at the ranch?" "No, nothing happened at the ranch. Something happened to me." Nathan took a deep breath and forced himself to meet her eyes. "Willa, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me say it all before you respond, because if I do not get it all out at once, I might lose my courage." Willa nodded slowly and sat down on the sofa, gesturing for him to continue. "You have slept all of 2 nights without coming to my ranch, and I am a wreck," Nathan said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Not because of the nightmares, though I did have one last night. I am a wreck because you were not there, and I realize that I do not just need your voice to help me sleep. I need you, all of you. Your laugh and your stories and the way you look at the sunset like it is something precious and rare, the way you talk about your students with so much pride and affection, the way you are brave enough to build a new life when the old one did not fit you anymore." He paused and ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his inability to find the right words. "What I'm trying to say, and doing a terrible job of it, is that I have fallen in love with you, Willa. Completely and hopelessly in love. And I know I have no right to feel this way, and I know you were just trying to help someone who was struggling. And I know you came to Colorado to be free and independent, and you probably do not want some rancher telling you that he cannot imagine his life without you in it. but I cannot keep pretending that I only need you because of the nightmares. I need you because you have become essential to me, as necessary as air and water and sunlight, and if you do not feel the same way, I will understand and I will not bother you again. But I had to tell you the truth. I had to give you the chance to know how I feel." He finally ran out of words and stood there, his heart pounding, waiting for Willa to say something, anything. She was staring at him with wide eyes, her lips slightly parted, and Nathan could not read her expression at all. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Willa stood up and crossed the small distance between them. She reached up and took his face in her hands, her palms warm against his skin, and looked into his eyes with an intensity that made his breath stop. "You beautiful, foolish man," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Did you really think I was spending every night at your ranch purely out of charity? Did you think I was singing to you just because I felt sorry for you?" Nathan could not find words, so he just stared at her, hope beginning to bloom in his chest like a flower opening to the sun. "I fell in love with you somewhere between the second and third week," Willa continued, and now there were tears shining in her eyes. "I fell in love with your kindness and your strength and the way you care so deeply about everything and everyone around you. I fell in love with the way you listen when I talk. Really listen like what I have to say matters. I fell in love with the way you treat your ranch hands with respect and the way you talk about your parents with such love and grief. I fell in love with you, Nathan Everhart, and I have been terrified to say anything because I thought you only saw me as someone who was helping you heal, not as someone you could love in return." Nathan felt like he could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the overwhelming rush of joy and relief and love that flooded through him at her words. "You love me?" he asked, needing to hear it again, needing to be sure this was real. "I love you," Willa said firmly. "I love you so much that not being at the ranch these past 2 nights felt like missing a limb. I love you so much that I have been lying awake wondering if you were sleeping, if you were having nightmares, if you needed me and I was not there. I love you and I do not know what to do with that because I came to Colorado to be independent and free, and now all I want is to be with you." Nathan made a sound that was half laugh and half sob, and then he was pulling Willa into his arms, holding her as tightly as he dared. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face against his chest. And for a long moment, they just stood there, holding each other like they were afraid to let go. "You can be independent and free and still be with me," Nathan said when he could finally speak again. "I do not want to own you or control you or put you in a cage, Willa. I want to be your partner, your equal. I want to build a life with you where you can teach music and sing and be exactly who you are, and I will stand beside you and support you in everything you do. And if you want to keep your house in town and your independence, I will respect that. I just want to be part of your life in whatever way you will have me." Willa pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "What if I want to be your wife? What if I want to live on your ranch and wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night? What if I want to build our life together, truly together, not separate pieces that occasionally connect?" Nathan felt like his heart might burst from the happiness flooding through him. "Then I would say that is exactly what I want too. Marry me, Willa. Not because you feel obligated to keep helping me, not because it is practical or expected, but because we love each other and we want to spend the rest of our lives together. Marry me and let me spend every day proving that you made the right choice." "Yes," Willa said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan. 1,000 times yes." Nathan kissed her then, a kiss that held all the love and hope and promise of their future together. It was sweet and gentle and perfect, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling so widely that their faces hurt. The news of their engagement spread through Delta like wildfire, and the reactions were mixed. Some people thought it was wonderfully romantic that the rancher and the music teacher had found love under such unusual circumstances. Others whispered that it was scandalous that Willa had been spending nights at Nathan's ranch, even with Mrs. Chen as a chaperone. But neither Nathan nor Willa cared about the gossip. They had found something precious and rare, and they were not going to let small-minded talk take that away from them. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Delta. Willa wore a simple but beautiful dress in pale blue that made her eyes look like the sky after a storm. Nathan wore his best suit and could not stop smiling the entire day. Mrs. Chen stood as Willa's witness, and Jim stood as Nathan's. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Willa like she was the air he needed to breathe. They held a reception at the ranch, inviting everyone who had supported them during their courtship. The ranch hands had cleaned up the barn and strung lanterns from the rafters, and Mrs. Chen had spent days preparing enough food to feed an army. There was music and dancing, and at one point Willa sang for the assembled guests, her voice filling the barn with such beauty that several people were openly crying by the time she finished. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift home, Nathan and Willa finally had a moment alone together. They walked hand in hand through the ranch grounds, looking up at the stars that seemed impossibly bright in the clear Colorado sky. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, pulling Willa close against his side. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "I am more sure of this than I have ever been of anything in my life," Willa said firmly. "I love you, Nathan. I love this ranch and this life we are building together. I do not regret coming to Colorado, and I certainly do not regret falling in love with you." "I still have nightmares sometimes," Nathan admitted quietly. "Not as often as before, but they still come. Is that going to be all right? Are you going to be all right with a husband who sometimes wakes you in the night because he is fighting demons you cannot see?" Willa stopped walking and turned to face him, her hands coming up to cup his face. "Nathan, listen to me. I knew what I was getting into when I first came to your ranch. I knew you were struggling, and I knew that healing is not a straight line. There will be good nights and bad nights. There will be times when the memories are stronger and times when they fade into the background, but I will be there with you through all of it. I will sing to you whenever you need me to. I will hold you when you wake from nightmares. I will remind you that you are good and brave and that what you did was necessary to save innocent lives. We are partners now, in everything, for the rest of our lives." Nathan kissed her again, pouring all his love and gratitude and hope into that kiss. When they finally made their way back to the ranch house, to the bedroom they would now share, Nathan felt a peace settle over him that he had not felt since before the shooting in the bank. That night, he slept deeply and dreamlessly with Willa curled up beside him. And when he did wake once in the early morning hours from a brief nightmare, Willa was there immediately, her hand finding his in the darkness, her voice soft and soothing as she began to sing. Nathan focused on the sound of her voice, on the warmth of her body beside him, on the knowledge that he was loved and safe, and he drifted back to sleep with a smile on his face. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment for both of them, but it was also full of joy. Willa continued to teach music lessons, converting one of the unused rooms in the ranch house into a studio where students could come for their lessons. She also started a small choir in town, bringing together people who loved to sing and creating something beautiful and communal. Nathan was proud of everything she accomplished and made sure she knew it at every opportunity. Nathan, for his part, found that the nightmares continued to fade as time passed. He still had difficult nights occasionally, particularly around the anniversary of the shooting, but they were no longer the constant companion they had been in those first terrible weeks. Having Willa beside him made all the difference. Just knowing she was there, that he was not alone with his demons, gave him the strength to face them. The ranch prospered under Nathan's steady hand. He made improvements to the property, expanding the herd and hiring more hands to help with the work. He treated everyone who worked for him with respect and fairness, and the ranch developed a reputation as a good place to work. Several of the hands brought their families to live on the property, and the ranch began to feel like a community rather than just a business. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Willa announced that she was expecting a baby. Nathan was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. The thought of being a father was both thrilling and terrifying. What if he was not good enough? What if he passed on his nightmares and struggles to his child? Willa, as always, knew exactly what he was thinking. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said firmly, taking his hands in hers. "You are kind and patient and loving, and our child is going to be so lucky to have you. And if you ever doubt yourself, I will be right there to remind you of the truth." Their son was born in late November of 1886, arriving during the first snowfall of the season. Nathan had never been so scared in his life as he was during those long hours of labor, pacing outside the bedroom while Mrs. Chen and the doctor attended to Willa. But when he finally heard the baby's cry and was allowed into the room, all his fear melted away at the sight of Willa holding their son, both of them healthy and safe. They named him Daniel, after Nathan's father. And from the moment Nathan held him for the first time, he knew that his heart would never be the same. This tiny, perfect person was part of him and part of Willa, and Nathan would do anything to protect him and give him the best life possible. Willa recovered quickly from the birth, and they settled into the rhythm of parenthood. Nathan discovered that he loved being a father, even when Daniel kept them up at night with crying or needed constant attention. He would walk the floors with his son in his arms, singing the songs that Willa had sung to him during those first terrible weeks, and he would feel a peace and contentment that he had never imagined possible. One night, when Daniel was about 3 months old, Nathan woke from a nightmare. It was a bad one, vivid and intense, and he came awake gasping and disoriented. Before he could spiral into panic, he heard Willa's voice, soft and sweet, singing one of the lullabies she sang to Daniel. She was sitting in the rocking chair by the window, their son in her arms, and she was looking at Nathan with so much love and understanding that he felt tears prick his eyes. "Come here," she said softly, and Nathan got out of bed and went to her. She shifted Daniel to one arm and reached out to take Nathan's hand with the other. "Sit with us." Nathan sat on the floor beside the rocking chair, resting his head against Willa's knee while she continued to rock and sing. He felt the tension drain out of his body, replaced by the warmth and safety of being with his family. Daniel dozed in Willa's arms, making small, contented noises, and Nathan felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. "I love you," he said when Willa paused between songs. "Both of you. More than I can ever find words to express." "We love you too," Willa said, her free hand coming down to stroke through Nathan's hair. "Always and forever, no matter what. You are not alone anymore, Nathan. You will never be alone again." Time passed, bringing changes and growth. Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, learning to walk and talk and charming everyone he met with his sunny disposition and curious nature. Willa continued to teach and sing, and she started writing her own songs, creating music that told the story of their life together. Nathan expanded the ranch further, buying adjacent property and building a larger house to accommodate their growing family. 2 years after Daniel was born, Willa gave birth to twin daughters, Rose and Lily. Nathan was beside himself with joy at having 3 healthy children, and the house was suddenly full of noise and laughter and life in a way that made Nathan's heart sing. The nightmares came even less frequently now, pushed back by the overwhelming happiness of his daily life. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Nathan and Willa took a rare evening to themselves. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch the children, and Nathan took Willa on a ride to a spot on the ranch that overlooked the valley. They spread out a blanket and watched the sunset, sitting close together and talking about everything and nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked as the sky turned gold and pink and orange. "Marrying me and staying here instead of pursuing your own dreams?" Willa turned to look at him with an expression of such love and certainty that it took his breath away. "Nathan Everhart, you are my dream. This life we have built together, our children, our home, our community, this is everything I ever wanted and so much more than I ever dared to hope for. I do not regret a single choice I have made since the day I met you. You gave me the freedom to be myself while also giving me a partnership, and a love that makes me better than I could ever be alone. That is not a compromise. That is a gift." Nathan pulled her close and kissed her deeply, tasting the truth of her words in the kiss. "You saved my life," he said when they finally pulled apart. "In every way that matters, you saved my life. I was drowning in guilt and nightmares, and you pulled me back to shore with your voice and your patience and your love. I would not be the man I am today without you." "We saved each other," Willa corrected gently. "I was drowning too in my own way, drowning in loneliness and the fear that I had made a terrible mistake by leaving everything I knew. You gave me a place to belong, a purpose, a love that lets me be both independent and part of something bigger than myself. We are partners, Nathan. We built this life together, and we will continue to build it together for the rest of our days." As they sat there watching the last light fade from the sky, Nathan thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The shooting in the bank, the weeks of sleepless nights and nightmares, the desperate acceptance of Willa's offer to help him. At the time, it had seemed like the worst period of his life, something he would have given anything to avoid. But now, sitting here with his wife in his arms and his children safe at home, Nathan could see that those terrible weeks had led him to the greatest blessing of his life. He would not wish the experience of taking a life on anyone. The weight of that action would never fully leave him, and he knew he would carry it with him until his last breath. But he had learned to live with it, to integrate it into who he was rather than letting it define him. And he had learned that strength was not about never struggling or never needing help. Strength was about being willing to accept help when it was offered, about being vulnerable enough to let someone see your pain and trust them to help you heal. Years continued to pass, bringing all the joys and challenges that come with building a life together. Daniel grew into a thoughtful young man who loved working with the horses on the ranch. Rose and Lily were inseparable, two sides of the same coin, one practical and steady, the other artistic and dreamy. Nathan and Willa had two more children, another son named Thomas and a daughter named Grace, and the ranch house was constantly full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of a large family. Nathan's nightmares never completely disappeared, but they became rare enough that he could go months without having one. And when they did come, Willa was always there, her voice ready to pull him back from the darkness, her presence a constant reminder that he was loved and safe. She sang to their children every night, passing on the tradition that had saved Nathan's life and brought them together. And Nathan would sometimes stand in the doorway and listen, his heart full to overflowing with love for his family. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Nathan was known as a fair and honest businessman, and he used his success to help others in the community. He funded improvements to the school in Delta, ensuring that all the children in the area had access to a good education. He helped struggling ranchers get back on their feet after bad seasons. He employed dozens of people, treating them not as servants but as valued members of the ranch family. Willa's music school grew as well, attracting students from surrounding towns and even from as far away as Grand Junction. She wrote and published several collections of songs, and her music was performed in churches and concert halls throughout Colorado. She never forgot where she came from or the courage it took to leave her old life behind, and she made sure to support other women who were trying to build lives on their own terms. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Willa by building her a proper music conservatory on the ranch property. It was a beautiful building with perfect acoustics and large windows that let in natural light. There was space for private lessons, group classes, and small performances. When he showed it to her, Willa cried happy tears and kissed him until they were both breathless. "You did not have to do this," she said, walking through the beautiful space with wonder in her eyes. "This must have cost a fortune." "You are worth every penny," Nathan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You have given me everything, Willa. A home, a family, a reason to keep going when I thought I could not. This is just a small way of showing you how much you mean to me." "It is not small at all," Willa said, turning in his arms to face him. "It is perfect. You are perfect. This life we have built is perfect." "Not perfect," Nathan corrected with a smile, "but pretty damn good." They hosted a grand opening for the conservatory, inviting the entire town to celebrate. Willa gave a concert, her voice as pure and beautiful as it had been 20 years ago when she first sang Nathan to sleep. Their children performed as well, all of them having inherited their mother's musical talent to varying degrees. Nathan stood at the back of the room and watched his family shine, and he thought about how far he had come from that broken man who could not sleep for the nightmares. Life was not always easy. There were still hard days. Days when the memories pressed too close, or when the weight of responsibility felt too heavy. There were illnesses and accidents, and the normal struggles that come with running a large ranch and raising a family. But through it all, Nathan had Willa by his side, and that made everything bearable. As they grew older, Nathan and Willa settled into a comfortable routine. They still made time for each other, taking walks in the evening and talking about their days. They still laughed together and sometimes argued and always made up. They watched their children grow into adults and start families of their own, and they delighted in the grandchildren who brought new energy and joy into their lives. Nathan's hair turned gray, and his body developed the aches and pains that come with age and a lifetime of hard work. But Willa still looked at him like he was the most handsome man she had ever seen, and Nathan still thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Their love had matured and deepened over the years, becoming something solid and unshakable, a foundation that everything else in their lives was built upon. On the evening of their 40th wedding anniversary, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains as they had done countless times before. Their children and grandchildren had left after a day of celebration, and the house was quiet once more. Nathan held Willa's hand, their fingers intertwined in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you remember the first night you sang to me?" Nathan asked, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. "I was so desperate and so scared. I did not know if anything could help me." "I remember," Willa said, squeezing his hand. "I remember thinking that you were the saddest man I had ever seen, and I wanted so badly to help you. I had no idea that helping you would end up being the best thing I ever did for myself." "You gave me my life back," Nathan said. "And then you filled that life with so much love and joy that sometimes I feel like my heart cannot contain it all. Every good thing I have, every moment of happiness, it all traces back to you." "We gave each other our lives," Willa corrected, as she always did when Nathan tried to give her all the credit. "We saved each other, Nathan, and we built something beautiful together, something that will last long after we are gone. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, the music conservatory, all the lives we have touched and helped. That is our legacy, and it is a good one." Nathan pulled her close and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Sing to me," he said softly, "like you used to in the beginning. I do not have nightmares anymore, but I still love the sound of your voice more than anything else in the world." Willa smiled and began to sing, her voice still strong and true even after all these years. She sang the first song she had ever sung to Nathan, the hymn about grace and peace and being held in loving arms. Nathan closed his eyes and listened, letting the sound of her voice wrap around him like a warm blanket. And he thought about how lucky he was to have found her, to have built this life with her, to have loved her and been loved by her in return. As the song ended and the last light faded from the sky, Nathan opened his eyes and looked at Willa. She was looking back at him with the same love and devotion that he felt. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that everything he had gone through, all the pain and struggle and nightmares, had been worth it because it had led him to her. "I love you," he said simply, "today, tomorrow, and every day after that until the end of time." "I love you too," Willa said, her voice full of emotion. Always and forever, my darling, always and forever. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out one by one. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. The years would continue to pass, bringing more changes and challenges and joys. But through it all, they would have each other, and that would be more than enough. Nathan never forgot the sound of the gunshot that had changed his life, but he also never forgot the sound of Willa's voice singing him back from the edge of despair. Those two sounds were intertwined in his memory, the darkness and the light, the pain and the healing, the moment that broke him, and the voice that put him back together. And every night, for the rest of their lives, whether he needed it or not, Willa would sing to Nathan before they fell asleep. It became their ritual, their way of honoring the journey that brought them together and the love that sustained them through all the years. Sometimes she sang hymns, sometimes lullabies, sometimes the songs she had written herself about their life and their love, and Nathan would listen with his eyes closed and his hand holding hers, grateful beyond words for the gift of her presence, her voice, her love. They grew old together, watching the ranch pass to their children and then to their grandchildren. They saw Delta grow from a small frontier town into a thriving community. They weathered droughts and harsh winters and economic hardships, and they celebrated good seasons and family milestones and moments of pure joy. Through it all, they had each other, and that made every burden lighter and every happiness sweeter. When Nathan was 70 years old, he fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. The doctor was worried, telling Willa that Nathan's lungs were weak and his age was working against him. For weeks, Nathan drifted in and out of consciousness, fighting for every breath. And through it all, Willa never left his side. She sat beside his bed day and night, singing to him constantly, her voice hoarse from overuse but never faltering. "Do not leave me," she whispered between songs, her hand clutching his. "I am not ready to say goodbye. We have more life to live together, more songs to sing, more sunsets to watch. Stay with me, Nathan. Please stay with me." And somehow, whether through sheer force of will or the healing power of Willa's voice, Nathan pulled through. He recovered slowly, regaining his strength day by day, and when he was finally well enough to sit up and talk, the first thing he did was pull Willa into his arms and hold her while they both cried tears of relief and gratitude. "I heard you singing," he said when he could speak. "Every moment, even when I was too far gone to respond, I heard your voice. It was like a rope pulling me back, refusing to let me drift away. You saved my life again, Willa, just like you did all those years ago." "I will always save you," Willa said fiercely, "and you will always save me. That is what we do. That is who we are." They lived for many more years after that scare, making the most of every day they had together. They traveled, something they had never made much time for when they were busy raising children and running the ranch. They visited the places Willa had dreamed of seeing, and Nathan took joy in watching her experience new things with the same wonder and enthusiasm she had brought to everything else in her life. But no matter where they went or what they did, their favorite place was always home. The ranch, with its familiar rhythms and routines, with their family gathered around the dinner table and the sound of grandchildren playing in the yard. This was where they belonged, where their roots ran deep, where their love had grown and flourished and become something that would outlast them both. Nathan Everhart lived to the age of 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Willa beside him. The night before he died, he had been feeling tired but content. They had spent the day with family, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. As night fell and they retired to their bedroom, Nathan lay down with a sigh of satisfaction. "Sing to me," he said to Willa, as he had said thousands of times before. "One more time, sing to me." Willa lay down beside him and began to sing, her voice still strong despite her own advanced age. She sang all his favorite songs, the ones that had become the soundtrack of their life together. And as she sang, Nathan held her hand and smiled, his eyes drifting closed. "I love you," he whispered as sleep claimed him. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life we built together." "I love you too," Willa said, her voice breaking slightly. "Sleep well, my darling. I will be right here when you wake up." But Nathan did not wake up. Sometime during the night, his heart simply stopped, and he slipped away so peacefully that Willa did not realize he was gone until morning. When she woke and found him cold and still beside her, she wept with a grief that threatened to consume her. But even in her sorrow, she was grateful that he had not suffered, that he had died surrounded by love, that his last night had been filled with family and song and peace. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Nathan and Willa had touched over the years. Ranch hands and neighbors, students and fellow ranchers, friends and family from across the state. They all came to pay their respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness, who had built something lasting and good, who had loved well and been well loved in return. Willa lived for 3 more years after Nathan's death, and they were hard years filled with loneliness and grief. But she was sustained by the memories they had created together, by the family they had raised, by the knowledge that their love had been real and true and lasting. She continued to teach music until the very end, and she still sang every day, her voice a connection to the man she had loved for more than 40 years. On the evening she died, Willa gathered her children around her bed. She was weak and tired, ready to rest, ready to be reunited with Nathan. As the sun set outside her window, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and pink and orange, Willa asked her children to sing for her. They sang the hymns and lullabies she had taught them, the songs that had been part of the fabric of their family for as long as they could remember. And as they sang, Willa closed her eyes and smiled, and her last thought was of Nathan, of the sound of his voice calling her name, of the life they had built together from pain and healing and love. The Everhart Ranch continued for generations after Nathan and Willa were gone, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a testament to the foundation they had built. And every member of the family who lived on that land knew the story of how it all began, with a man who could not sleep from nightmares and a woman who sat beside his bed and sang him to peace. They knew that the ranch was built on more than just hard work and good land. It was built on love and healing, on 2 people who found each other in the darkness and created something beautiful together. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees and the sun set over the distant mountains, people swore they could hear the sound of singing drifting across the ranch, a voice pure and sweet and full of love, singing an old hymn about grace and peace and being held in loving arms. And they knew it was Willa, still singing to Nathan, still keeping watch over the life they had built together, still proving that love is the strongest force in the world, capable of healing even the deepest wounds and creating beauty from pain. The legacy of Nathan and Willa Everhart lived on not just in the land they had worked or the buildings they had constructed, but in the love they had shown to each other and to everyone around them. Their story became a legend in Delta, told and retold through the years, inspiring others to believe that healing is possible, that love can triumph over even the darkest struggles, that sometimes the most broken people can build the most beautiful lives if they are willing to accept help and open their hearts to the possibility of something better. And so the story ends as it began, with a man and a woman, with nightmares and songs, with darkness and light, with pain transformed into love and love transforming everything it touched. Nathan and Willa found each other when they both needed saving, and they saved each other in every way that mattered. They built a life together that was full and rich and meaningful, and when they died, they left behind a legacy that would last for generations. It was a love story set in the Wild West, in a time and place where life was hard and survival was never guaranteed. But it was also a love story that proved something timeless and universal, something that transcends any particular time or place, that love is the greatest healing force in the world, that we are stronger together than we are alone, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. Nathan Everhart had not slept in weeks from nightmares when Willa Kensington first sat beside his bed and sang him to sleep. But from that first night forward, he was never alone in his struggles again. And the life they built together, the love they shared, the family they raised, and the community they served, all of it grew from that simple act of kindness, that willingness to sit in the darkness with someone who was suffering and offer them the light of healing through song and presence and unconditional love. It was, in the end, a story about two people who found exactly what they needed in each other, who grew together rather than apart, who faced every challenge as partners and celebrated every joy as a shared victory. It was a story about how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things if we are brave enough to accept help and open enough to let love in. And it was a story that proved beyond any doubt that happily ever after is not just a fairy tale ending, but a real and achievable goal for those who are willing to work for it, fight for it, and never give up on each other no matter what challenges life brings their way.